Well, a very good afternoon and welcome to KTN Business Today. My name is Abi Agina and we have an interesting show coming up this afternoon. Some good news for Chase Bank customers as the Central Bank of Kenya announced that the bank is set to be reopened come next week, the 27th of April. We will be dissecting what this means for the bank as well as for the consumers. Other than that, we'll also be taking a look at what's been happening in the unemployment scene. And we'll have an interesting conversation on virtual job searches. You will be interested to know some of the trends we are seeing and what this means for the job market. Well, all that coming up this afternoon. Of course, you can tweet us over my Twitter handle at Agina Abi, or you can use our KTN News Twitter handle at KTN News to share your feedback with us. Speaking of feedback, let's take a quick look at what our Twitter poll question is for this day. Well, join us on our Super Bowl just to get a sense of what we are asking this afternoon. And our question is, do you feel the opening of Chase Bank should actually have been sooner? Do you feel the opening of Chase Bank should have been done sooner? That's our question for today on our Twitter handle. Keep tweeting, send us your feedback. What are your thoughts regarding the move that the Central Bank of Kenya has taken regarding the opening of Chase Bank come next week? That's our Twitter poll question. Do send us your feedback using our Twitter handle at KT News or my Twitter handle at Agina Abi. Well, away from that, let's talk about a story that is shaking most Kenyans today. It is relief this afternoon for Chase Bank customers after the banking sector regulator announced that a deal had been struck for the reopening of the bank. In a media briefing by Central Bank Governor Dr. Patrick Njoroge, KCB Group has acquired a majority stake in the fallen Chase Bank, which is now set to reopen on Wednesday next week. The group acquired the bank that was placed under receivership on April the 7th through its Kenyan subsidiary, KCB Bank Kenya. Online and mobile banking services will also become available on the day the bank is reopened. KTN's Ashley Mazuri has been following for us this story and now gives us the latest.
Today I'm pleased to announce that, in fact, we as a central bank have endorsed an agreement or understandings that have been reached and agreed upon today at 8:30 this morning, between KDIC, which is the receiver, with KCB Bank Kenya Limited, which I'll just call KCB, on modalities to reopen Chase Bank in receivership in the next few days, and the eventual acquisition of a majority stake in the bank. We will provide liquidity to make sure that this works.
Indeed, some good news there regarding the reopening of Chase Bank. Well, so what really does it take to buy a bank? We'll be scrolling some graphics for you just in a moment to tell you what it takes to buy a bank. Well, of course, Chase Bank is under receivership, and right now it's under the custody of the Kenya Deposit Insurance Corporation, which will be transferring this to KCB Group, which eventually will be floating a decision to buy the bank. And there are the graphics we were telling you about, that 5 investors, both local and foreign, have expressed interest, and CBK had actually been evaluating this particular tenders, and so far it seems like KCB is in pole position to acquire a majority stake of the bank, and this is the latest development around the banking circles. Well, those are just some of the numbers regarding Chase Bank, and we are now want to get into this conversation further and speak to one of the journalists who has been covering this story extensively. And joining us this afternoon is Paul Wafula, who works with us at The Standard. Well, Paul, thank you for having us, for actually joining us this afternoon. Of course, nobody expected that this would be this soon. I don't know if you expected this to happen this soon.
No, I didn't. Actually, we were all caught on this one. The central bank caught all of us flat-footed. We were expecting something next week because we got wind that there were at least 5 different banks, some of them from the Middle East, that had more or less placed their bid.
Yeah.
And we were made to understand KCB was a very strong contender, but it was not among those that had actually been able to seal the deal.
Yeah.
So we were expecting something next week, given the pace at which the central bank has been working. So this really came to us as a surprise, and very good news for people in the bank.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, it seems the gravity of this issue sort of pushed CBK and the Kenya Deposit Insurance Corporation to work fast and just see that the bank is reopened. Perhaps, I don't know, from your side of things, what could have triggered this quick approach to reopen the bank?
Actually, the collapse of Chase Bank had left actually an egg on the face of the Central Bank of Kenya, if I were to say that, because this was a bank that was basically at a position where it will have weathered the storm. Remember, yes, Chase Bank did have some liquidity problems, and it had approached FDB, African Development Bank, that was giving it 5 billion. And it was more or less fundraising to try and meet this shortfall that it was. But more or less, Central Bank let it to suffer. The bank run, when it was supposed to have come out earlier to say, look, Chase Bank has problems, but it's not as serious problems to get people concerned. So the fact that Central Bank kept quiet at the hour of need for Chase Bank, it really pushed everyone over the cliff, and that's probably what caused the bank run on Chase Bank and eventually closure. So with this kind of mishandling of the whole situation and letting everything get out of hand, it was imperative that the central bank at least come in very strongly to try and ensure that Chase Bank comes up. And I mean, if you look at the kind of depositors that Chase Bank had, the kind of partners it had, these are not just local, people from Switzerland, people from Germany, all these were international investors. So you want to send the correct message to the market that, look, when you put your money into the country, in the banking industry, you are safe. So this was really not just about the central bank, it was really about the investors and about the image that it was coming out there.
Of course, the investor sentiment is quite critical. Looking at Chase Bank, Paul, of course, close to 55,000 depositors. I understand that they can only withdraw 1 million shillings and below. Perhaps, why is this the case, especially now that we've seen depositors who have over 1 million shillings? What's next for them?
Usually, in the bank, the people who really like cause a lot of worry or who suffer most are what we call the retail maybe depositors, people who have maybe 100,000 in the bank. Probably those are just the one just to pay their rent, they just receive their salary and so on and so forth. But the healthier institutions, like for instance, we have people like SportPesa who had more than 500 million in there, and when the bank went under, they were saying, we were not being affected.
We saw also Law Society of Kenya.
The Law Society of Kenya had their money there. All those people had their money there. So in terms of the short term, they may not really suffer as much as possible as, I mean, a retail investor, you and I, who were expecting to pay rent, who is expecting to pay school fees from that. So if you look at it also in terms of 1 million, usually that is a standard that most of the time Kenya has come to appreciate to put in. 100,000 is actually what is insured. So if the bank goes down, you're only assured of 100,000. Then anything above that is something that probably will be how healthy the bank has gone with. So by 1 million, I think, and you look at 1 million actually covers 97% of the accounts at Chase Bank. So if you are dealing with 97%, you are remaining with only 3%.
The big depositors.
It means the big depositors who may wait for 1 or 2 more days to negotiate the deal.
Do we know of the time frame that the big depositors might have to wait?
Unfortunately, now it's too early to say, because it depends with a few other factors, and one of it will be if these depositors are willing to remain in the bank where KCB is the one that is running it. Probably the reason why they are there is because they do not want to be with Kenya Commercial Bank. So if Kenya Commercial Bank comes on board, then maybe they will not want to stay. But it will also be like maybe Kenya Commercial Bank is giving the bank the necessary support and the confidence that it deserves, and this is what I see what it is. Then you will have the big depositors also maybe deciding to stay on board. But you may find a situation whereby the big depositors may be requested to maybe take equity or take shareholding in the bank, so that they don't have to push their money out. That's also something that may be possible. But at the end of the day, I think this is very good news for the banking industry today in Kenya.
Well, apart from that, Paul, we also have on phone Duncan Lumwamu. My director, do we have Duncan already online? Well, we'll be crossing over later to Duncan, but as we wrap up this conversation, Paul, of course, the president has come out saying that the banking sector is resilient, and he wants to see people behind all these malpractices behind bars. We've not seen any arrests, we've not seen any prosecutions. What should you expect about the bank managers who are supposed to be accountable for this situation we are in?
Yeah, maybe for Chase Bank, and that is a national bank that had some problems recently.
Yeah.
There's been some action. We had maybe for public relations purposes or for whatever it's worth.
Yeah.
We've had actually the Director of Public Prosecutions coming up very strongly and asking these people, actually CID asked them to go and report statements, and some of them are supposed to be arrested. Some of them went and reported, I mean, to the CID, and some of them even took statements, but we don't know how far these investigations are. But you know, the country we live in, if you are among the people who have the money, you are likely to take longer in terms of the investigations might never come to an end. If it was you and I, we will already be behind bars. Remember the other time we were looking at the employees of Equity Bank who were caught up in some mess. They were arraigned in court almost immediately. I mean, the people who really don't have any other place to go to, more or less justice is served as fast, as swiftly as people expect.
Okay.
But when it comes to the big guys, you know, it takes a bit time. Yeah, they can.
Perhaps,
so,
Paul, before we wrap up, we saw some interesting movements where the head of the banking fraud unit was recently moved. I don't know, what do you read in this?
I think it's a matter of trying to find people who do not know or who don't have too many interests.
Okay.
You remember, like during the time when we had the former governor, that is Professor Njuguna Ndung'u, he also made his own changes while he was at Central Bank, and this more or less he had people that he would work with. And when this new governor came, there were also a few other changes that have happened at the central bank and so on and so forth. So probably you are looking at a situation whereby you want someone who you can trust to deal with these things, because these things are not just coming up today. Some of these frauds have happened for over a decade ago.
Yeah.
So someone must have been sitting on their job looking at it. So you don't want the same person who was there probably to be the one to oversee another transformation. So probably you want people to get out and leave other new and a safe pair of hands to be able to probably take over the banking sector.
Fantastic. Yeah. But Paul, is your money safe in the bank?
That is, right now I'm trying to balance my ways. I have some money on my mobile. I have some money somewhere behind the mat. I've diversified so that in case of a shock, I can know a fallback position. Yeah, but the banking sector is safe. I mean, I don't see anything to get worried about. It's not
systemic.
No, I mean, it's not systemic. It's something that just, maybe these are just the bad eggs in the whole pool. Yeah.
Many thanks, Paul Wafula there, an investigative writer with Standard, just helping us break down the latest developments in the banking sector. And of course, we continue to update you on the latest regarding the banking industry, because it is an important industry. It's actually worth close to 6 trillion shillings. That's in deposits and assets. Well, away from that, let's now talk about insurance. Well, the Insurance Regulatory Authority has resolved to wind up Blue Shield Insurance in a move that could close the curtain on what was once Kenya's biggest underwriter of public service vehicles. Blue Shield was placed under statutory management on September the 16th, 2011, after several years of complaints by clients whose claims had not been paid. The firm was the biggest insurer of PSVs, matatus and motorcycles by the time it was taken over by the regulator. The underwriter's life insurance arm, Shield Assurance, was acquired by British firm Prudential PLC for 1.5 billion shillings in 2014. A special IRA meeting held on Monday resolved to wind up a Blue Shield, but shareholders of the collapsed insurer have filed an application seeking to stop the regulator's move. The shareholders claim the winding up is a ploy by the Commissioner of Insurance, Sami Makovi, to defeat ongoing investigations into alleged embezzlement of funds by IRA officials and receiver managers of the company. The shareholders claim that criminal investigation detectives are seeking to arrest receiver managers of Blue Shield Insurance and IRA commissioners over diversion of 200 million shillings from the collapsed underwriter. From insurance, let's now talk about issues to do with financial inclusion. A new report by the World Bank shows that the cost of sending money back home to Africa is still higher than anywhere else. According to World Bank's Migration and Remittances Factbook for 2016, it reveals the global average cost of sending 2,000 shillings home was about 7.4% in the fourth quarter of 2015, down slightly from the previous quarter and 0.6 percentage points below the end of 2014. However, Sub-Saharan Africa, with an average cost of 9.5%, remains the highest cost region and over 25% costlier than other developing countries. The report says an additional concern is that major international banks continue to close correspondent banking accounts of money transfer operators to limit exposure to money laundering and other financial crimes. A World Bank survey confirms that account closures are widespread, with adverse impacts on remittance costs and flows in rural and remote regions across the African continent. Kenya and Uganda have both recorded a substantial increase in remittance flows from the diaspora in 2015, backing the trend for Sub-Saharan Africa and developing countries as a whole. Kenya saw an increase of over $120 million to $1.56 billion in 2015, making up 2.4% of GDP. The figure for Uganda was at actually $1.075 billion or 3.3% of GDP, while for Tanzania it remained the same at $389 million, which is 0.8% of GDP. Overall, Sub-Saharan Africa saw a modest growth of 1% in remittances in 2015 compared to 0.2% in 2014. The Kenya government has remained mum on the status of the 400 billion shilling oil pipeline linking Kenya and Uganda, even as Tanzania came out to state that it had entered into a deal with Uganda, raising more suspicion on the ongoing diplomatic chess game. Kenya Pipeline, the agency that will be among the implementers of the project, distanced itself, saying they were not privy to the ongoing discussions between the technical committee and Ugandan authorities.
As you know, there's a Heads of State Summit taking place in Kampala at the end of this week. Our role is to stand up, salute, and march. We are very, very confident we will play a role. We have been playing a role already, a technical support role. We've been part of the ministry's team putting together Kenya's plans and case. And we fully expect that once a decision is made either way, whether we are doing Hoima to Lamu or a Kenya-only pipeline, as the media has put it, or whatever, we will be there. So our position is we are ready to go whichever way the Kenya government finally tells us to go.
While still keeping it with matters to do with the pipeline, well, Kenya Pipeline Company has moved in to dispel rumors of a looming fuel shortage in Western Kenya. While addressing journalists, the board chairman John Ngumi noted that the situation had been contained and it had emanated from a stockpile in its Kisumu and Eldoret depots. News of the shortage had sent consumers into a state of panic, triggering an artificial buyout that saw motorists rush to fuel to avoid a stockout.
And I don't want to duck the issue. We've had challenges with power. We are very reliant on power. Kenya Pipeline is KPLC's single largest client in Kenya. We pay between 20 and 25 million bob a month to KPLC. We are the single largest customer. We've had challenges. Especially in the Changamwe area. These same challenges that caused outages in Mombasa and other places. And because of those challenges, once you take the system down and then have to put it up again, it's ours. And the demand for fuel does not go down. So we've had to embark on a series of emergency moves to ensure that there is fuel here and there. On the diesel shortage, which I think was the one that came in the headlines the other day, there was a very specific reason. When product is moved in the pipeline, it's moved in batches. So until one batch is cleared, the other batch can't come in. What we had was a situation where we had kerosene in the tanks in Kisumu especially, and Eldoret, but in Kisumu especially. Behind the kerosene was diesel. The diesel couldn't move into either Kisumu or Eldoret until the kerosene had been removed. And the kerosene couldn't move because our tanks were full. And our tanks were full because separately ERC began a crackdown on adulteration of fuel. And we suddenly saw that the planned take-up of kerosene, it went down because kerosene is one that was being used for adulteration of petroleum. So we were caught up in this odd situation where the pipeline system was full completely.
Quite an elaborate explanation about the fuel shortage in Western Kenya. And on that note, we want to take a quick commercial break. But when I come back, I'll be speaking to a gentleman that is running an interesting model that is aimed at having career fairs. And the gentleman is Yusuf Reja, the CEO of Zebra Jobs. We'll be speaking to him shortly. Don't go too far and you won't miss out more.